Welcome to the Raised with Jesus podcast, 10 minutes of the life of Jesus meets yours. We've got your daily Bible reading for June 12th, 2019, looking at the very first portion of 1 Corinthians chapter 6. 1 Corinthians 6. If any one of you has a case against another, does he dare to seek judgment before the unrighteous, and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is judged by you, are you not competent to deal with insignificant lawsuits? Do you not know that we will judge angels? How much more the matters of this life? So if you have lawsuits involving matters of this life, do you appoint those people as your judges whom the church considers of no account? I say this to make you feel ashamed. Is it really the case that there is not one wise man among you who would be able to decide a dispute between his brothers? Instead, brother sues brother, and that in front of unbelievers. The fact that you have lawsuits with one another is already a complete failure on your part. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be defrauded? Instead, you yourselves do the wronging and defrauding, and you do it to your brothers. We'll pause there today because the next couple of verses really are transitional thought as Paul takes up the matter of sexual immorality. But we'll just stick with lawsuits for today. And the point that he really makes here is that you as a Christian, first of all, have more insight into the basic matters of this world and the basic matters of this life. And you have more insight than even the unbeliever. An unbeliever who has a doctorate or a master's degree and sits as a judge on a bench or perhaps sits as a member of a jury. That unbeliever does not have the same sort of insight about life and the sort of ideas about retribution and fairness that God has. But you as a Christian have been given the mind of God. That is to say, that you as a Christian have been taught the way God thinks, and have been taught to view life the way God views life. And so the wisdom that you have as a Christian surpasses even that of the wisest unbeliever. That jives exactly with the way God talks, especially in the book of Psalms and Proverbs, where he says that the fool says in his heart there is no God, and then believers are described as wise when they seek after the Lord. And so in God's eyes, foolishness and wisdom is a characteristic of unbelief or belief. That even the most simple-minded of a believer has more wisdom than the wisest of, or the smartest and most letters after his name of an unbeliever. And that's what Paul says in his first major point. He says, don't you know that you will judge angels? And is there not a wise man who is able to judge a dispute between brothers? The point that he's making there is that you as a Christian, you know what life is about. You know that the fellowship we share is of greater worth and of greater value than even the loss that one might take in a lawsuit. And his first main point, or the main idea behind all of this, is that we want to do all that we can to treasure and to avoid breaking the fellowship that we share, because the fellowship that we share is a deep and eternal bond. And even if you lost $10,000, $20,000, $120,000 in this life, well, what is that in the grand scheme of things? You have a Lord who will watch out for you, who will continue to provide for you. But you have to remember that your fellow Christians, the ones that you hopefully worship with, and even ones that you don't see now, are people that you will be sharing eternity with. And so in view of eternity, we want to view our worldly transactions in that light. We don't want to get so wrapped up in what we have or what we don't have, and in spending the time and chasing after more and accumulating wealth so that we may, sit back and take it easy, like that rich man who tore down his barns and built bigger barns, and God said, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you." Well, that man as an unbeliever approached life as an unbeliever, which meant that he was simply trying to get ahead and be successful so that he could make good use of the remaining 30, 40, 50 years that he might have in this world. But God says, "You fool, you unbeliever, this very night your life will be demanded from you." And that man who had wealth in this world, but was not rich toward God, lost absolutely everything that he had stored up for himself, as well as his own eternal soul, as he lost that in hell forever. So Paul's first major point is just the idea. Verse 6, brother sues brother, and that in front of believers. How preposterous. First of all, we share a fellowship together. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be defrauded? Because the fellowship we share is more important than the loss one might take. And the idea there really is that Christians should each be willing to give up whatever accusation they might have or whatever standing they might have. Where the one who was wronged would say, no, it's not a big deal. I forgive you, and I want to approach you as a Christian brother or sister. And the one who did the wronging also says the same thing. I forgive you. I want to approach you as a Christian brother or sister. And each one, instead of seeking, to get their justice before Judge Judy, really, each one seeks to remedy the fault. Where the one who was wronged seeks to forgive the fault and say, don't worry about it. The money is not a big deal. And the one who did the wronging and made some ill-gotten gain, or the one who committed an injury against the other, would be bending over backwards to say, friend, let me set this straight. Let me make this right. And so the attitude that our fellowship has toward one another is one of trying to make things right. And instead of trying to look out for myself and being terrified of what I might lose. And then the other thought, do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is judged by you, are you not competent to deal with insignificant lawsuits? Don't you know that we will judge angels at Judgment Day? After Jesus resurrects all people of all time and separates believers from unbelievers. And you and I will be standing there on the believer's side as Jesus says, depart from me to the devil and his angels, or his demons, angels, really, who were confirmed in their wickedness. He says, depart from me and get away from me. And he says the same thing to the unbelievers. At that time, you and I will be standing there cheering and raising our hands and nodding our heads. Yes, God's judgment is correct. God's justice is correct. His judgment is right. You will judge angels. You will judge the world. You and I will be there affirming, as Jesus basically calls you up onto his judgment seat with him. And you and I will be passing the same judgment as him to the glory of his name against those who had opposed him and who had rejected him in their unbelief and their wickedness. So Paul says, of course, if you can judge the world, what happens? Why can't you just make a proper judgment about the tiniest little sliver of the money in this world? We're not even talking about something eternal. We're not talking about, the eternal salvation or the eternal soul and life or non-life of a person. We're not talking about an angel's eternity. We're talking about money, We're talking about the wealth of this world. So Paul says, get your priorities straight. So as you go about your day, think of the blessings, really, that God has given to us in the fellowship that we share. That the people you worship with now will be the people that you worship with for all eternity. That the relationships we build now with one another and even with others who come to our congregation are relationships that, God willing, will last into eternity and forever. And so the people that we worship with and the people who are members here, look through your membership directory. Please, just do this one thing today. Look through your membership directory and find one person that you haven't seen in a while. Find one person. Give them a call and say, friend, I miss your fellowship. I miss seeing you at church. Can we get together for a coffee? I'm wondering, what's going on with you these days? And I care about you. And mean it. Because it's not a matter of an obligation for you to carry out, but it is a matter of the debt of love that we owe to one another. A debt that comes from being in fellowship together, a fellowship that is under the umbrella of the blood of our Savior. So you can find us Wednesday evening, tonight, 7 p.m. at 2250 South Holland, Sylvania Road in Maumee. Also Sunday morning, 9 a.m., 2250 South Holland, Sylvania Road. God bless your day.